My Apache neighbor said, "Rancher, you promised to marry me when I grew up." I thought she'd forget. The small town where the rancher boy and the Apache girl lived was the kind of place where everyone knew each other's names. It was surrounded by wide-open fields, rolling hills, and tall trees that swayed in the gentle wind. The sun shone brightly most days, and the smell of fresh earth and grass was always in the air. Life moved slowly here, and people took time to stop and say hello, even if they were busy. A rancher boy named Luke was born into a family that had lived on the land for many years. His father and grandfather had worked the ranch before him, raising cattle and horses. Luke loved the ranch. He loved the sound of the cattle lowing at dawn, the feel of the leather reins in his hands, and the wide sky stretching above him. From a young age he learned to ride horses, fix fences, and take care of the animals. It was a life full of hard work, but also a life full of freedom. Not far from Luke's ranch lived an Apache family. Their home was different from Luke's. It was smaller, and they had traditions and stories that went back many generations. The girl who lived there was named Ayana, which meant eternal bloom in her native language. Ayana was a bright, curious child, with dark hair and eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of her ancestors. Even though she came from a different world than Luke, the two children became fast friends. Luke and Ayana met one summer afternoon when they were both about 8 years old. Ayana was exploring near the fence that separated their family's land, and Luke was out checking the horses. When he saw her, he waved and called out, "Hey, want to help me?" Ayana smiled shyly and nodded. That day they spent hours wandering the fields, chasing butterflies and talking about everything and nothing. They shared stories about their families and dreams for the future. Luke told her about how he wanted to be a rancher, just like his father, while Ayana shared tales of her tribe's history and the beautiful ceremonies she had witnessed. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, Luke turned to Ayana with a serious look. "When you grow up, you'll marry me, right?" he asked, half joking, half hopeful. Ayana laughed, a soft sound that echoed in the quiet evening. "You promised?" Luke grinned. "I promise." They shook hands on it, making the promise feel like the most important thing in the world to their 8-year-old hearts. For the rest of that summer, Luke and Ayana were inseparable. They explored the woods, climbed trees, and ran through the tall grass, imagining wild adventures and exciting futures. The promise between them became a secret treasure, something special that no one else knew about. To Luke, it was a fun joke. To Ayana, it was a hope she held close. But as the seasons changed, so did things. Luke's family grew busier with the ranch work. There were fences to mend, cattle to move, and storms to prepare for. Ayana's family faced their own struggles too, with their small house needing repairs and money often tight. Sometimes Ayana had to stay at other relatives' homes, and the carefree days of summer became memories. The school took up most of their time, and the children who once played together started spending more time with their own groups. Luke joined the football team, and Ayana became involved in cultural activities on the reservation. Though they saw each other occasionally, the promise seemed to drift away like a leaf on the wind. Luke thought little of the promise as the years passed. To him it was a childish thing, something that happened when kids don't understand the world yet. He figured Ayana would forget about it, just as he did. After all, they were growing up, changing, and making new plans for their futures, but Ayana never forgot. Even as she grew older, the memory of Luke's promise stayed in her heart. It was a symbol of something good and steady, something to hold on to when life felt hard. She carried it quietly, like a secret light that warmed her during difficult times. Their friendship changed too. What was once innocent play became more complicated as they became teenagers. Luke noticed Ayanna less and less, caught up in school, work, and the dreams he was building for himself. Ayanna watched from a distance, wondering if he still remembered the promise they made under the sunset sky. One day, many years later, Ayanna returned to the town. She was no longer the little girl with wild curls and bright eyes. She was taller, confident, and had a quiet strength that came from her heritage and the challenges she had faced. She had spent time learning about her culture, and she was proud of who she was. When Luke saw her again, something stirred inside him. The promise that he had thought was just a child's joke suddenly felt real. Ayanna's words caught him off guard. "Rancher, you promised to marry me when I grew up. Do you remember?" Luke felt a mixture of surprise, confusion, and something deeper he couldn't name. The carefree boy who had made that promise was gone, replaced by a man who had to think carefully about what he wanted and what he owed to the past. The story of Luke and Ayanna's childhood promise was not just about two children playing in the fields. It was about the bonds that form early in life, the hopes that survive despite distance and time, and the question of what it means to keep a promise made from the heart. After many years had passed, life had taken Luke and Ayanna on very different journeys. Luke stayed in the small town, continuing to work on his family's ranch. He was strong and hard-working, rising early each morning to check the cattle and repair fences. The ranch had been his whole world, and he was proud of it. He often thought about the future, how he would expand the ranch, maybe even pass it on to his own children someday. His days were full of routines, but he always felt the quiet weight of responsibility on his shoulders. Ayanna's life had been quite different. When she was still a young girl, her family faced difficult times. The small house she lived in was old and needed many repairs. Money was often tight, and sometimes her family had to move between different relatives' homes. Because of this, Ayanna spent time away from the town and the ranch. She learned to be strong, to adapt to new places, and to carry her family's traditions with her wherever she went. As she grew older, Ayanna became more connected to her Apache culture. She learned about her ancestors, their history, and the values that shaped their people. She took part in ceremonies and festivals that honored the land, the seasons, and their heritage. This connection gave her pride and strength. It also made her feel more certain about who she was, even as the world around her changed. Though she had moved away, Ayanna never forgot Luke or the promise they had made when they were children. She often thought about those summer days, the wide fields, and the sunset where they had shaken hands. To her, that promise was not a simple childhood joke. It was a sign of something real, a hope for the future that gave her comfort during difficult times. Meanwhile, Luke thought very little about that promise. He had many things on his mind: work on the ranch, friends, and school. To him, the promise was a funny memory, like a story he might tell to make someone smile. He didn't expect Ayanna to remember it or to take it seriously. Yes, life carried on, and the two children who once ran freely together began to grow apart. Their days were filled with different people, different dreams, and different struggles. Luke focused on his ranch and his own plans. Ayanna focused on her family and her culture. Then, one day, everything changed. Ayanna returned to the town where they had grown up. She came back stronger and more confident than before, carrying with her the lessons of her people and the hope she had kept safe. Her return surprised many, including Luke. When Luke saw her again, he was caught off guard. The girl who once chased butterflies beside the fence was now a young woman, standing tall and proud. There was something different about her, something that made Luke pause and think about the past. Ayanna did not waste time with small talk. She looked Luke in the eye and said softly, "Rancher, you promised to marry me when I grew up. Do you remember?" Luke's heart beat faster. He wasn't sure what to say. The words felt heavy, full of meaning he hadn't expected. The promise he thought was a joke was now real, and it brought with it questions he had never asked before. He wanted to believe that life was simple, that promises made in childhood were just stories. But seeing Ayana again made him realize that some promises never disappear. They wait quietly until the time is right to be remembered. At first, Luke felt confused. He didn't know how to respond or what to think. His life was tied to the ranch, to the work he had done for years. He had never imagined that a promise from the past could affect his future so deeply. Ayana, too, felt a mixture of hope and fear. She had waited a long time to speak those words. She wasn't sure if Luke would take her seriously or if he would laugh and walk away. But she needed to know if the promise still mattered. Their reunion was not easy. They had changed a lot since they were children, and the years apart had created distance between them. But the promise they made long ago created a bond that neither could ignore. As they talked more, Luke began to understand how important that promise was to Ayana. It wasn't just about marriage. It was about trust, respect, and the connection they shared. It was a symbol of the friendship and hope they once had, and the possibility of building something new. Ayana explained how her culture had taught her to value promises and to honor them with her whole heart. She shared stories about her family and the strength she found in her heritage. Listening to her, Luke started to see things differently. He realized that promises could hold power beyond words. They could shape lives. But their reunion also brought challenges. Luke and Ayana came from different worlds, and their families had different ways of life. Some people in the town didn't understand their connection and questioned whether their promise could truly mean anything. Luke worried about what others might say. He wondered if he could balance his life on the ranch with the promise he had made so long ago. Ayana worried too. She worried about fitting into a world that sometimes seemed unsure about her. Despite the difficulties, something between them began to grow again. They found comfort in each other's presence and strength in their shared past. The promise, once forgotten by Luke, was now a thread that pulled their lives together. As days passed, Luke and Ayana spent more time talking and remembering the past. They visited the places where they had played as children and shared their hopes for the future. Slowly, Luke started to feel that maybe, just maybe, the promise wasn't a mistake after all. He realized that life wasn't just about the ranch or the work. It was about people, connections, and honoring the promises that come from the heart. For Ayana, the promise was a bridge, a way to connect the past and the future, her culture and the town, her dreams and reality. And for Luke, it became a chance to look beyond his world and embrace something new. Their reunion was a beginning, not an ending. It was the start of a journey that would bring challenges and joy, questions and answers. Together, they would face what came next, guided by a promise made under the sunset sky many years before. As Luke and Ayana spent more time together, they began to see how much had changed and how much had stayed the same. Their childhood promise was no longer just a memory. It was a real part of their lives. But with this new closeness came questions and challenges they hadn't faced before. Luke had always thought life was simple. The ranch was his world. Every morning he woke up early to feed the animals and check the fences. The land was familiar, steady, and comforting. But he understood how to live and work there. But now, with Ayana back in his life, he started to see that life was more complicated than he had believed. Ayana was proud of her Apache roots, and she carried her culture with her in everything she did. She wore traditional jewelry, spoke some of her native language, and practiced the customs her family had passed down for generations. For her, this was a source of strength and identity. At first, Luke didn't fully understand. He admired Ayana and cared for her, But her world was different from his. He had grown up surrounded by ranch work, country life, and small-town ways. Ayana's traditions and experiences were new to him. One afternoon they sat by the edge of a small creek near the ranch, watching the water flow over smooth stones. The sun was warm, and a gentle breeze moved through the trees. "I want you to understand who I am," Ayana said softly. "My family and my people have a history that goes back a long time. We have ceremonies, stories, and ways of living that are important to us. It's not just the past. It's part of who I am every day." Luke nodded slowly. "I want to learn," he said honestly. "I want to know what matters to you." Ayana smiled, grateful for his words. "It's not always easy," she said, brusque. "Sometimes people don't understand. Sometimes they judge us or don't respect our ways. But I'm proud of who I am, and I want you to be proud too." Luke felt a mixture of admiration and worry. He knew their differences might create problems. Some people in town might not accept the relationship or the promise they had made. Others might question if a rancher and an Apache woman could build a life together. But Luke also felt something strong inside, something that went beyond culture or background. He cared for Ayana deeply and wanted to honor the promise they had made as children. He realized that respecting her culture was part of respecting her as a person. Over the next few weeks, Luke tried to learn more. He asked questions about Ayana's traditions and listened carefully when she spoke. Sometimes he even attended gatherings on the reservation where he saw dances, songs, and ceremonies that were full of meaning. At first it felt strange and unfamiliar, but over time Luke began to appreciate the beauty and strength in those traditions. He saw how important community was to Ayana and how her heritage gave her a strong sense of belonging. Ayana, too, learned more about Luke's world. She rode horses on the ranch and helped with chores. She felt the hard work and care that went into running the land. Although it was different from her own experiences, she respected Luke's dedication and love for the ranch. Their days together were a mix of learning and sharing. They talked about their hopes and fears, their dreams and doubts. The promise they had made so long ago was no longer a simple childhood joke. It was becoming a real commitment. But their journey was not without obstacles. Some people in town whispered behind their backs. Some families questioned whether their relationship would last. Luke felt the weight of expectations from his family and neighbors, while Ayana felt the pressure of her community's hopes and concerns. One evening, after a long day on the ranch, Luke sat with his father on the porch. The sky was clear, and the stars began to appear. "Dad," Luke began carefully, "Ayana's back." She reminded me of the promise I made when we were kids. His father looked at him thoughtfully. "I remember," he said. That promise meant a lot to her. Luke sighed. "I want to do the right thing, but I worry. It's not just about me. It's about our families, our community. People might not understand." His father nodded slowly. "Sometimes what matters most isn't what others think. It's what's true to your heart. But you'll have to be strong. There will be hard days ahead." Meanwhile, Ayana faced her own challenges. Some of her family members were worried about her relationship with Luke. They wanted her to be proud of her culture and cautious about outsiders. Her grandmother, a wise elder, spoke to her one afternoon. "Ayana, you must honor your people and your promises. But you must also protect your heart. Love is strong, but it must be built on respect and understanding." Ayana listened carefully, feeling the weight of her grandmother's words. She knew that being with Luke meant bridging two worlds, her Apache heritage and the life on the ranch. Despite the difficulties, Luke and Ayanna found strength in each other. They learned to talk openly, to share their fears without judgment, and to support one another. One day, they decided to visit a nearby sacred site that was important to Ayanna's people. It was a place where her ancestors had prayed and connected with the land for centuries. As they walked through the quiet forest, Ayanna explained the stories behind the place, the spirits that protected it, the lessons it taught, and the hope it gave to her people. Luke listened with respect and awe. He felt a deep connection not only to Ayanna but also to the land itself. It was a moment when their two worlds came together. In that moment, Luke understood something important. The promise they had made wasn't just between two people. It was a promise to respect, to learn, and to build a future that honored both their histories. Their journey wasn't perfect. There were times when they disagreed or felt uncertain, but each challenge made them stronger and more certain that their bond was real. As the weeks passed, Luke and Ayanna grew closer, building trust and understanding. The promise from their childhood was no longer a simple memory. It was the foundation of something new and hopeful. They knew there would be hard days ahead, but they were ready to face them together. Together, they were beginning to build a future where love, respect, and promise could bridge even the widest gaps. After spending so much time learning about each other's worlds and growing closer, Luke knew that he had to make a choice. The promise he made as a child was no longer just words. It was a real commitment with real feelings attached. But this decision was not easy. It was about more than just Luke and Ayanna. It was about their families, their communities, and the future they wanted to build together. Luke spent many nights thinking deeply. He thought about the years he had spent on the ranch, about the life he had always imagined for himself. He thought about the hard work his family had done, and the responsibility that rested on his shoulders. Could he balance all of this with the promise he made to Ayanna? Could he honor her and his own dreams at the same time? One clear morning, Luke walked through the fields with his father. The sun was shining, and the cattle grazed quietly nearby. Luke decided to speak openly with his father about what was in his heart. "Dad," he began, "I want to honor the promise I made to Ayanna. I care about her deeply, and I want to build a future with her." His father looked at him seriously. "Luke, I know this is important to you. It won't be easy, and there will be people who don't understand. But if your heart is true, then you must follow it." Those words gave Luke the courage he needed. At the same time, Ayanna was thinking about her own future. She had faced many challenges in her life, but this promise with Luke felt like a new beginning. It was a chance to bring together two different worlds and create something beautiful. Ayanna talked to her grandmother one afternoon. They sat by the fire, the warm glow lighting their faces. "Braths, grandmother," Ayanna said softly, "I want to be with Luke, but I also want to honor my family and our traditions." "How can I do both?" Her grandmother smiled kindly. "You must be true to yourself and to the promises you make. Love is not about losing who you are. It is about sharing who you are and growing together." Those words stayed with Ayanna as she prepared to take the next step. Luke and Ayanna decided to talk openly about their hopes, fears, and plans. They knew that building a life together would not be simple, but they were ready to face the challenges as a team. One day, Luke invited Ayanna to the ranch for a special dinner. He wanted to show her that his life, his family, and his home could be hers too. The evening was warm and peaceful. They sat outside under the stars, the sounds of crickets and the cool breeze surrounding them. "Luke," Ayana said, "I know this promise means a lot to both of us, but it's more than just words. It's about respect, understanding, and love." Luke nodded.
I want to honor you and your culture.
"I want us to build something real." They made a new promise that night, not just the promise they made as children, but a promise to support each other, to listen, and to grow together. But even with their commitment, life brought new challenges. Some people in town still doubted their relationship. There were whispers and questions. Some family members had concerns and fears. Luke and Ayana had to be patient and strong. One day, Luke's sister came to visit the ranch. She was kind, but worried. "Luke," she said gently, "I want you to be happy, but are you sure this is the right path?" "There are differences between you and Ayana's world. It won't be easy." Luke looked at her calmly. "But I believe in what we have. I believe love and respect can overcome those differences." Ayana faced similar concerns from her own family. Some relatives worried about losing traditions or about the difficulties ahead. But Ayana was determined. She invited her family to visit the ranch so they could see where Luke lived and understand the life they hoped to share. It was an important step, a way to build trust and bridge the gap between two worlds. When the families met, there was a mix of emotions. Some were cautious, others curious. But slowly, as they shared meals and stories, a new respect began to grow. Luke and Ayana worked hard to keep their promise alive. They learned from each other, blending their traditions and values. Luke learned to honor Apache customs, while Ayana embraced the ranch life and its responsibilities. Their love was a quiet strength, something steady and true that helped them face the challenges ahead. One afternoon, they took a walk to the place where they had first made their childhood promise. The fence near the fields where they used to play. Luke took Ayana's hand. "We've come a long way," he said softly. Ayana smiled. "Yes, and we still have a long way to go."
They knew their journey was just beginning. The promise made years ago was no longer just a childhood memory. It was the foundation of a shared future.
Together, they looked ahead, ready to face whatever came next, side by side. Life had changed a lot for Luke and Ayana since that childhood promise was first made. Now, standing together in the present, they faced a new beginning, a future that was theirs to build. But this future was not just about the two of them. It was about their families, their communities, and the hopes they shared. The days on the ranch became full of shared moments. Ayana grew more comfortable with the ranch life, helping with chores, riding horses, and learning the rhythm of the land. Luke, in turn, embraced her traditions, joining her at gatherings and learning about the ceremonies that had shaped her people for generations. Together, they created a balance between two worlds. It wasn't always easy. There were moments when the differences between their cultures seemed big and difficult to cross. But each time, they talked openly and listened carefully. They learned that respect was more important than agreement, and love was stronger than any challenge. Luke's family began to see the strength of their bond. His father, who had once worried about the promise, now watched with pride as Luke and Ayana worked together. The ranch was no longer just Luke's world, it was becoming their world. Ayana's family also grew to accept Luke as part of their lives. Her grandmother, wise and kind, blessed their union and shared stories of love and courage that had passed through generations. She reminded them that love was a powerful force, one that could bring healing and hope. The small town, which had once been filled with whispers and doubts, began to see the couple differently. People noticed how they supported each other, how they faced hardships with courage, and how their love was steady and true. One day, Luke and Ayanna stood together at the edge of the ranch, looking out over the fields that had been part of Luke's family for so long. The sun was setting, casting golden light over the land. Luke took Ayanna's hand. "We've built something special," he said. "Not just for us, but for everyone around us." Ayanna smiled. "It's a promise kept, but it's also a new beginning." They talked about their dreams, about starting a family, about teaching their children the values of both their cultures, and about building a life filled with love and respect. Their promise had come full circle. What started as a childhood vow had grown into a deep and lasting commitment. It had carried them through years of change, challenges, and growth. Ayanna had shown that promises made from the heart could stand the test of time. They had proved that love could bridge differences and build a future filled with hope. Their story became one of many in the town, a story told with respect and admiration, a story about the power of promise and the strength of love. As night fell, Luke and Ayanna sat by the fire, the stars shining above them. They held hands and looked at the sky, feeling grateful for the journey that had brought them together. They knew there would be more challenges ahead, but they were ready. Together they would face whatever came next, with courage, with respect, and with love. The promise was no longer just words. It was a living, breathing part of their lives. And their story,